Meet your new go-to for a fresh and inclusive approach to health.
Wellness Rebranded is the pod where a dietitian, a personal trainer, and a mental health therapist combine perspectives to help you redesign your relationship with food, fitness, and your feelings.
Whether we're serving up juicy stories, breaking down the latest research, or dropping practical tips, we'll leave you informed, inspired, and ready to take health-promoting action.
We get you because we are you.
We've joined forces because we know that health isn't one-dimensional, and neither are you.
Tune in for real talk that cuts through the wellness and diet culture hype. Stay for the laughs, the insights, and the feel-good vibes.
So guess what? Last week I went to water aerobics. And get who was the trainer? You want to guess, Elizabeth, who was my water aerobics teacher?
Around laughing with Connor.
Yes, Tara.
We should be so lucky.
So for all of you who don't know that Tara teaches water aerobics, she does, and it's an awesome class.
I like the name Marie said aerobics. I do too. Aerobics? How do you say it? Say it again.
Oh my, here we go. Am I mispronouncing it? Aerobics.
You're not mispronouncing it. It's just
How do you
like
say
your
it?
accent. Yeah.
What is the right way?
Aerobics.
Okay, we were in a class of that in water. And then I started talking with our guest today, and her name is Amy, and she's a good friend of all of us, and she has a long history of working in HR. And we started talking about work-life balance, and even more, we started talking about how to be assertive. Because this woman was talking during this class and she was giving advice to this other woman about how to present herself during a work interview. And I was taking mental notes like you guys have no idea. I'm like, how can I record this woman because I didn't know this and that? And maybe I'm not as assertive when it comes to how I present myself in the world. And there's so much to learn from her. So Amy, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today and enlightening us. That's another word I can't pronounce with your knowledge. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Maria and Tara and Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here. This is a dream come true. I'm an avid listener of your podcast, so I'm happy
We love that.
to contribute.
That's awesome. So what is this about work-life balance? I wish we would have recorded that conversation, Amy, because I think we women should talk about this more and how to be assertive while doing it.
Yeah, so in that conversation, one of the other participants of the water aerobics class was about to have an interview, I think the next day for a job. And she hadn't interviewed in some time. And, funny thing, I had worked for the organization where she was interviewing many years ago. I started my career there. And so I gave her some tips. I said, you'll probably have a panel of 3 people interviewing you. And she said, yep. They sent me the names. It's 3 people. And I said, they'll ask you and everyone else the exact same questions. And I said, the most important thing that you say is going to be what you ask at the end, not necessarily the answers to their, pre-screened canned questionnaire. And so, and then we got to talking about, well, how do you answer the question why you left your last job, especially if maybe you left because you were let go, maybe you were laid off, maybe, you have medical reasons that you left, or you left to be a stay-at-home mom. And so kind of talking through what's the best way to address tough questions in an interview.
And I remember when you were saying that, I remember feeling so empowered. Like I realized when you were talking that I would have presented myself in like at a lower level than I should have, if that makes sense. Like I would have sold myself not as enthusiastic as you were coaching her to do it. And it made me
I agree.
think,
I had that same thought
Right?
during this conversation. It's like, well, I wouldn't have interviewed like that. And she makes it sound way more awesome than I feel like I actually am.
but the way she reframed
Yes.
everything, I was just blown away by it.
Yeah, I wasn't in the water aerobics.
Oh,
class,
that's
can you
your-
give an example?
Next time, come to our already. Look at all you miss.
It'll be Wednesday.
Yes, we would love for you to join us, Elizabeth, at water aerobics next time. So yeah, so in this particular instance, this person who's interviewing left her previous role potentially because of a medical issue. And it was brought up by another person. Well, why don't you just say, well, you had to take medical leave and that's why you left? And that's when I paused and said, wait, you don't want to do that. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I want to say it's unfortunate that we can't be honest with our employers as women and as employees. However, as a woman and especially as a mom, we have to be very careful about the perception of employees in the workplace. And if I go to an interview and I say, oh, I have medical issues, or oh, I have 2 kids and I have to pick them up from school, that makes me a less desirable candidate, whether it's right or wrong. That's the
It's
case.
unfortunate. Yeah.
It is. And there are certain industries in which it might not be as big of a deal, but in an office environment, especially in a leadership role, employers want their employees available. They want them to prioritize their work. And am I saying that you have to put your work before your family? Absolutely not. But in an interview, your best case scenario is to stick to the question and answer the question from the perspective of a professional, not from the perspective of your personal life. And so in this instance, the way I would frame it, if someone said, why did you leave your previous role? I would say, well, we left on great terms. Since I've left, I've been pursuing other opportunities and they've been going really well. And I've been really happy starting my own business. And
Which in this case applies to that person, right?
Right.
It's not like we make it up. We did apply. Yeah.
right, in this case, this person had started their own business. So I started my own business. I've been having a lot of success. I've been really passionate about it. I left my old job on great terms. I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. They'd be happy to serve as references, which is true in this case. And then I saw this job posted and it really aligns with my values. And I decided to apply and here I am.
Mhm.
I love the way you reframe that. So would it be accurate to say that one tip for stepping into a more assertive role for yourself is to give yourself permission that you don't always have to answer the question that's being asked, or like you get to frame the conditions and in how you put yourself out there, even if someone's trying to pin you into a certain light. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you're the one being interviewed. You're telling your story. You get to tell it your way.
What about just in life? Like if you were to take it out of the context of an interview,
Yeah,
and
I
maybe
mean,
just
same
more
thing.
globally in the workplace.
Absolutely. Or even meeting a new friend or going on a date. There's a lot of back and forth in conversations, in life, in personal and professional, situations. And you'll get asked a lot of questions about yourself. And sometimes maybe you don't want to answer. So the ability to set boundaries and frame it the way you would like to represent yourself and put your best foot forward. Yeah, there's absolutely a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah.
When I first started teaching group fitness, I worked at this gym and they said, Terry, I want you to teach this class. And I said, no, I'm in one-to-one personal trainer. I'm too introverted to be up in front of 30 people. I don't think this is for me. And one of my coworkers pulled me aside and he was like, listen, you are introverted and you don't want to be up in front of people, but you're going to put on this suit of like Terra De Leon super fit pro. And you're going to walk into that room and you're going to turn on your music really loud. And then you're going to kind of let your voice like flow up and join with the music. And you are thinking of yourself as a performer at this point. Like you're not Tara the introvert, you're Tara the fit pro. And you're going to kind of like cast yourself as this like superhero essentially. And this is your audience that you're entertaining, which I don't think of myself as an entertainer typically. I think of myself as like a coach, an educator, a motivator, a friend, whatever, but not an entertainer. And I feel like that's a great example of how we can kind of decide how the world views us. Because now when I see people that have went to those classes all the way back then, that's how they remember me,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and also decide how to view yourself, right? Because we're all
Yes.
multifaceted. Like, sure, you could focus on the introverted part of you, or you could choose to focus or create, not in an inauthentic way, but step into a different aspect of who you can be.
And that's exactly what I learned from Amy that day in a few minutes. I started thinking of myself. I'm a firm believer that what we repeat to ourselves is what we're going to believe. And what we believe about ourselves is what we're going to present to other people, right?
Exactly. And if you're asking me, how do I become assertive? How do I become, how do I represent myself well in an interview? That's like step number 1, like build your self-confidence, right? Like
Yes.
give yourself the confidence and permission to perform, like Tara said.
And those few moments with you made me reevaluate how I'm seeing myself. And it made me think for a minute, I I have to become the best seller of myself, like the best HR, the best, like I'm the one who's selling, in a way, quotation marks, selling myself to others, whether professionally, personally, whatever, as a woman in general. And choosing the right words and presenting ourselves in a certain way is going to make a difference, not only for other people, even in myself. Because
Yeah, I
when I
mean,
start
believing
talking,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Like
when
you
I
have to
start
believe
talking,
it to sell it.
yeah, when I start talking about myself in a certain way, that's how I'm going to start viewing myself. And therefore, that's the message I'm going to carry out. So that's what I learned. So tell us more, Amy. So assertiveness is choosing the words and working on that self-confidence that you were talking about. How can that relate to that work-life balance that so many of us struggle with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing, like you said, is feeling confident. And also, I think setting boundaries is really important. So, when it comes to work life balance, especially a lot of us who work remotely out of our homes nowadays, being able to give yourself the grace and freedom to balance your personal life with your professional life. So, I work 9 to 5 at home. I'm sitting at my desk most of the day, but do I get up and do dishes? Do I get up and do laundry? Do I go for a walk? Take some time to go to the gym? Absolutely. And I build that into my calendar. So if someone tries to book a time with me between 12 and 2, most days I'm not able to to meet those times. So giving myself permission and availability on my schedule and in my time management to set those boundaries and have that balance with my time. And there's little things that you can do to be more assertive and set those boundaries. I mentioned one, which is like the calendar, but also let's say your coworkers asking you to take on a task that's not urgent for you or not one of your priorities. There are ways to politely and assertively push back and say, I'm unable to take this on right now, but I can help you find someone who might be able to assist.
Mhm. I imagine there's someone listening, or maybe more than one, someone, Amy, who's thinking, well, that sounds great for you. You must be in some sort of leadership role that you can carve out 2 hours in your day and have that boundary. But what would you say to the people that maybe don't feel like they can do that, or actually can't do that?
Yeah. So in my position and my circumstances, I have my own business. So I set my own calendar.
Yeah.
So that's fair. I think if you're in a role that's hourly, maybe you're paid hourly, that can be tough, if you don't set your own schedule. I do think, I'm speaking specifically to remote work, but I know some remote workers who came into a new role and said, look, I consider myself working from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Okay. I'm paid for 40 hours a week, but that's 50 hours a week. And the reason I set my schedule that way is so that I'm not chained to my desk 8 hours a day. It gives me the flexibility to work flexibly, to flex my time. So that's one example for people who are maybe exempt employees, not necessarily on that hourly basis.
Mhm.
A lot of positions, I'm aware of that are hourly or on site, there is a cut and dry moment where you step into the building and you're on, and you step out of the building and you're off. So that's a little easier for most to say, when I'm at work, I'm working, when I'm home, I'm not. But for those of us who work remotely, it's a little bit more of a gray area. How do we define what parts of our day and what parts of our home belong to our workplace and belong to us? And that's where setting boundaries is so important.
And here's one thing, this might stir the pot with what you're saying, but I think with a personal story, I being an employee, an hourly employee that needed my job with the fear of being fired and all that stuff. But for example, I started working in the emergency room where I still work nowadays, way less hours than before, but I started working there 12 years ago. And in the interview, I said, I would love to work here. I do not work evenings and weekends. I don't want to do it. I cannot do it because it's a 24/7 shift job, right? Still today, they text me to work on a weekend or an evening. And my answer 12 years later is no, I do not do that. And I had to lose the fear of being fired. And I'm saying they're not hiring me because of doing night and weekend. They're hiring me because of my skills as a clinician in crisis situations, right? If it ends up that it doesn't work because of that. And so far, in 12 years, I haven't had a problem, but I was so proud of myself because I never done this in another job before. It was like, 10 p.m. text, and I was calling people and doing stuff because I didn't feel with the power of setting those boundaries. But now that I did, it feels so good. And I respected those boundaries, and the job has been able to work for me in those 12 years. You know how many clinicians have gone in and out because they burn out super quickly? My theory is that the boundaries were not as clear. Also, they do it way more often. But all this to say that it might stir the pot, but I still think that even if it's a job that it's hard to set boundaries, you can still do it, enforce them, and it's going to be more beneficial actually for everyone because you might last longer too.
Absolutely. And how powerful is that? The last thing I'm going to say to someone is do the bait and switch. Tell them you'll do it in the interview, get the job, and then change your mind, right? Like, you did the exact right thing. You went in from day one when you were interviewed, before you even had a job offer, and said, these are my boundaries. I'm interested in this job. I'm excited about this job. And these are my boundaries. And they've respected them, it sounds like, for 12 years.
So if you put on your HR hat, Amy, I'm curious, which I know you didn't take it off. I don't know why I phrased it that way, but well, I guess I'm asking like more from the human resources perspective than the person risk perspective. What do you think needs to be rebranded about work-life balance?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, one of the reasons that I went into HR consulting these past couple of years is because when I was an HR executive on the corporate side, I would hear leaders in my organization and in my industry saying, we value our people. Our number one resource at this company is our people. And they would say it out of one end, and then they would be the first to let someone go if something came up on the personal side that was out of their control.
Overwork you. The first one's overworking you.
Right. Especially, Maria, especially in your field in healthcare. I mean, my sister is a physician, and, same thing. There's such a shortage of caregivers, providers, that the people who are working are really just getting overworked. And so, it's easy for the administration, for the executives to say, we prioritize our people. But I'm not clear that every organization really does that and does it well. So
Well,
that's
and
why I got
funny,
into consulting.
interesting you say that, Amy, because that's the reason why the three of us came up with our corporate wellness program because of that. Because there's a lot to say. We care about our employees, we care about their emotional well-being, we care about, but how many times the three of us have heard, well, they say it, but it doesn't feel that way. So it's an invitation for organizations and agency and corporations to bring a program to really provide their employees with tools and tips, and even for those people in high positions to learn really how to respect and promote that environment of wellness. Because at the end, I was reading the other day, it's like billions of dollars that goes in the corporate world because of people missing work for different kinds of disabilities, right? And how they were saying, if we work on it as a prevention, not only is way better for the human being you have working for you, but financially.
Well, yeah, and I think, we see it in the company we work with who do invest in our services to bring wellness to their organization, the very tangible and intangible benefits of it. But also it makes me think of, I think when we think about work-life balance, we think about there's this thing you do in life and at home, and there's this thing you do at work, and they're separate. And how do you
they're
balance
not.
them?
Yeah.
And I think the world and employers, and Amy, you could probably speak to this even more effectively than I can, but work-life balance happens at work and at home.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
this scale thing, right?
I think this got really confusing during the pandemic when everybody was put to be working remote and none of us had anything to do because the world was shut down. So we were just in our houses all the time. And instead of working like 9 to 5, we'd be like, oh, I just got an email from somebody at 7 p.m. about work. I'll just answer it real quick.
Well,
Like,
the-
I'm not doing anything
Yeah.
else. And now we're stuck in this cycle of like, how do we get out of that?
The boundaries got blurry.
The boundaries got blurry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, depending on the type of role you're in, the type of company you're in, the type of manager you have, the type of job duties that you're faced with each day, work-life balance is going to look different for everyone. But, setting boundaries, I think, Maria, you'll agree, I'm sure, is so important at work, but it's important in your home life too. It's important with your husband or your partner or your family members or your mother-in-law, even your
Right?
kids.
A lot of times you have to set boundaries so that you can prioritize your self-care.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be like so simple and so it can be huge things that you're setting boundaries on. Like, I don't work nights and weekends, period. But it can just be little things. What do you want to have for dinner? Oh, I don't care. What do you want to have for dinner? Well, no, why don't you just say what you actually want? Why don't you tell, your friend, actually, I want sushi tonight. You good with that? Express your actual preference instead of just being easygoing.
I don't know if I've shared this in this podcast before. I'm sure I've had in my workshops. In my house, there's a boundary. I'm sorry if this is too much information, but mommy poops in peace. Okay. It's peaceful pooping. Yes. And because it was
live in your house.
it's
fun there.
it was constant. I mean, that I would go to the bathroom and then the door opens. Mommy, my sister, blah, blah, blah. Mommy, the dog, mommy. And I'm like, can I poop in peace? So I determined that I was going to make it a boundary. And sometimes, like, mommy's going to the bathroom. Remember, that's is my time.
Sign that you flip.
Nope,
pooping
I
in
should.
progress.
No, but
Pooping in peace.
this is the thing with boundaries. You might have to enforce them over and over, and that's okay. So when I'm sitting where I'm sitting, doing my business, and I hear the door opens because it's a separate door from the actual stall, from the actual, and I hear and I see those steps, I'm like, mommy is pooping and she's going to do it in peace. Unless there's blood, like a tornado warning, then I'm going to finish my business alone. Okay. I don't need to clean myself up in front of people waiting for, none of that.
And people will try to negotiate,
always.
Not just kids, but there's going to be a lot of like, hey, you only have till Friday to get this done. And you say, all right, I can complete this by Friday, but to do that, I need to push back on this particular task. So you tell me, help me prioritize. Do you want this done by Friday with this task taking longer? Tell me what's most important.
Yes, because we also get people used to how much we're going to disrespect our own boundaries. And how easy is to have a human being that always says yes and take on everything you want them to take on is beautiful. Nobody's going to put these boundaries for you, right? So it's consistent and frequent enforcement from your boundaries to protect your own well-being and energy and time and all that. Absolutely.
And I found that people who have less boundaries at work, especially, end up being less accountable. Like we say, oh, we can pile all this stuff on Elizabeth. She'll say yes, no matter what. Let's give it all to her. And then she's like, yeah, guys, no problem. But then the deadline comes around and we're like, hey, Elizabeth, where are you at? Why aren't you doing what you need to do? And she's so swamped and so overwhelmed and she's stressed out and she's not getting done what she needs to get done. So
As
yeah,
she
the yes
shouldn't,
people,
because
right,
they're not
and-
machines, as she
right.
should.
And so the yes people, I used Elizabeth as an example. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you the yes person, but the yes people are the ones who a lot of the times they fail.
Yeah, that's true.
That makes sense.
I think something you were talking about earlier made me think about, there's like the big work-life balance and the small work-life balance. And yes, maybe there's opportunities to focus on big ones, hopefully, but also small ones. Like something I see a lot is people not eating during the workday.
Yeah.
And
I do.
that is a simple work-life balance. I don't
Mhm.
care what role you're in. If you're at a job for 8 or 9 hours, you have got to figure out how to get nourishment in your body. And that's a simple way
Yes.
of bringing some balance.
Simple but powerful and needed, right?
Or
You guys are inspiring me to like create a poop in peace pact in my house and to set some boundaries at work where I get to eat every now and then. Or like sometimes I'll come home and I'll be like, I haven't peed in 8
I was
hours.
literally just gonna say, sometimes even going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
People are like, well, I don't do that. And
Yes.
from an intuitive eating perspective, if you're not eating during the day and you're not going to the bathroom during the day, you are very much disconnecting from your body and making that weakening your interoceptive awareness. That is a basic biological need to eat and go to the bathroom. And we all need to be giving ourselves the ability to do that no matter. I can't think. I will. Okay, one scenario. I was listening to a podcast last night with a brain surgeon, and he was saying it was actually quite fascinating that when you're in the middle of a very intense brain surgery, that it becomes very meditative and you get hyper focused on what you're doing. And sometimes, it can be hours and hours and hours go by. And he said, you don't feel your bladder, you don't feel hunger, you don't feel this and that. Maybe that is the one exception. You probably can't get out of brain surgery to go get lunch. But if you're not doing a job like that, probably most of us can figure out a time to go to the bathroom and to get lunch.
Should we go to Tara's job with signs and says let Tara do
Tara is not a brain
Let's
surgeon.
not please.
Tara, how about that?
Let her pee.
I would like to sit down every now and then at work too.
On the toilet.
Okay, but no, as a joke.
Kill two birds with one stone.
Perfect.
But remember, nobody's gonna do it for you. So that's a joke with signs, but it really has to come from each one of us to set those boundaries and make them be respected by others.
Okay, guys, I'm a wuss. Boundaries are hard for me.
It's hard for everyone, sweetie pie.
Okay, so Amy, what advice are you going to give her?
How to
For
set boundaries.
Tara.
Boundaries are hard for Tara.
Well,
So
okay. So
everyone-
one thing, Tara, is clarify the expectations from your management or your clients, right? So if they're saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, you kind of put your hand up and say, can you help me understand what my priority is at this moment? You're being pulled in 10 different directions, or clarify what you need from me before the end of the day so I can make sure to get that done before I
Oh, I
leave.
love that one.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Just helping you prioritize and kind of put it into a perspective, like make yourself and them pause. Like, what is your actual objective here? And how long do I have to accomplish it? If you have 16 clients in one day and no time built in between clients, that's something that needs to be addressed so that you do have the ability and availability to take breaks as needed.
Amy, this information was so useful. I enjoyed it since the water aerobics class and still now. It's so valuable. And I think as women, we need to keep working on giving ourselves more value and putting ourselves out there without reservations, without conditions. Just put ourselves out there and protect our well-being, either a personal life or at work.
Yeah, and Amy, we're doing this a little bit backwards, but we didn't do a proper introduction for you at the beginning of the episode. So we want our listeners to know who you are, what you do, where they can find you, when they may want to reach out. So Tara, tell us
Bring
about
it on.
Amy's bio.
Amy Thomas is the founder of Horizon Business Services, an HR consulting firm dedicated to transforming businesses that prioritize employee value beyond the workplace. With 15 years of HR experience, Amy has worked with clients from small startups to global organizations with over 20,000 employees. In her time as an HR executive, Amy recognized the need for a more people-first approach in business and transitioned into bringing her expertise as a strategic HR consultant. She has a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in HR development, plus people analytics coursework from Wharton, and certifications in conflict resolution and mediation. She's a community volunteer and a seasoned speaker who loves sharing her insights on HR and leadership. Amy is deeply committed to championing mental health and empowering women to advocate for themselves in and out of the workplace.
Ooh, I wish I would have known. You need to have me back from other times to talk about conflict resolution.
Not only that, Amy, I would love for you to be a speaker for the Emotional Fitness Studio next year for 2024.
I would love that.
Would be
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
You wanted to say
Wow,
something
yeah.
else before we end, or
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here, Amy. It was awesome. Great conversation. And just wanted to remind anyone out there that we are all three super passionate about bringing wellness to the workplace. We have a variety of ways to do that, partner together or individually. And so if you are in a workplace and in a position where you can bring wellness there, please reach out to us.
and thank you, Amy, once again for being here with us today. I think we have so much more to learn from you. Thank you for sharing all this with us. And for you listeners, don't forget to connect with us. Leave a like, a review, a smoke note. What is that like?
I like a smoke note.
Smoke notes. Leave it.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want to connect with me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Instagram at coaching_therapist.
I'm Elizabeth. You can find me at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition or in my Facebook group, Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tara De Leon Fitness. Guys, if you loved this episode or any of our other episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really helps us get the non-diet word out to the rest of the world. So please leave us a review.
Yes, thank you.